So, bookkeeping, is it important? Do you need to do it? And what are the essential parts of a successful business? That is what we are going to be talking about today. Check out this video.
Excellent.
Hi everyone, my name is Simon Mishevich from Optimize Accountants. Thank you ever so much for joining me on this particular video where we're talking about that droll subject, bookkeeping. Yes, it's boring. Yes, you might find it unnecessary, but actually you will start to see how vitally important it is for your business and the success that you deserve and want in the future. I'm so pleased and delighted to have Fraser Hodgkiss with me from Initor Global. Fraser, good morning to you.
Good morning, Simon. Droll and boring, bookkeeping? Surely not.
I think you and I both know it certainly can be that way. I'm going to be talking with Fraser of, yes, it is bookkeeping and payroll, various other things to do with your business can be very boring. Administration is not something that we wake up each morning and want to do. It certainly isn't. But we will be exploring why it is vitally important for you to do this. And indeed, what systems, apps you can use today to make it even better from tomorrow going forwards. Now, Fraser, I think it's worth going through a bunch of questions that many of our YouTube viewers will often find to pose to me about bookkeeping, but I'm not a specialist. I have to say that Optimize Accountants is a property tax specialist firm. We do not get involved in bookkeeping, and we'll talk about that later on of why. And indeed how we help our clients as well. But Fraser, from your perspective, why do you think it's important for clients to maintain good records?
Well, I think it's very, very important that accurate records are kept regularly. So it sounds very, very simple and very, very basic, but ultimately each business needs to know how much money is coming in and what money is going out. So how much is coming in through sales invoices and bits and pieces, and how much money is going out of the business, is leaving the business through expenses, through purchases, through money sort of leaving the business, because it then gives you a very, very clear idea of where your business is right now at the moment. So I think bookkeeping is very, very important. But it's one of those things that's not always kind of adhered to regularly, and it's essential that it's done regularly and that it's done at a very high standard to give a very accurate overview of how the business is performing ultimately.
I mean, people talk about bookkeeping is done for the sake of the accountants, and I've always argued that it's not really just for the accountants. If you do it right, there are so many other advantages. From your perspective, what are the advantages apart from, oh, it's for my boring accountant, he's asked me to do this paperwork, it's his fault, it's not really the accountant's fault at the end of the day, but ultimately, why is it advantageous for someone to maintain good records and look at their business?
It's absolutely essential, and ultimately, the more accurate your bookkeeping is, and ensuring that everything is in the right place, everything's accounted for, everything is reconciled, means that when the accountant comes to do the end of year accounts or the management accounts or whatever, they've got a great foundation with which to create that work from. So ultimately, the bookkeeping is one of those things, it's perceived as being a kind of a bit of a boring, drudgery sort of job to do. But ultimately what you're doing is you're taking a daily record of all the money that's coming into your business, all the money that's going out of your business, and getting a good idea of any problems that may be occurring in the future. So it's a great kind of way to scope perhaps the cash flow situation within your business. So if you are recording everything accurately, you might get an idea that there could be a cash flow problem occurring in the next 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. But it's a great way for you to sort of see exactly how your business is doing immediately, and to foresee and potentially avoid any financial sort of problems in the future. I think it also gives the business owners that are doing the bookkeeping a really good idea of the money that's coming into the business, the money that's going out of the business. So sometimes if you are kind of doing the bookkeeping on a weekly basis, you get to see every single expense, everything that's going out of the business, and it gives them an opportunity to just not necessarily audit that, but just to review that, because sometimes expenses become, every business becomes a little bit complacent every now and then, and we start buying things or doing things regularly that may not be necessary. So it's a good opportunity for the business owners to see exactly in minute detail what's sort of going out of the business, and to see whether that can be improved in any way.
I mean, you talked about the fact that a business owner will see what's going on in their business. I think that some of the advantages of someone doing bookkeeping themselves, especially when they're starting out in business, is to start doing their own bookkeeping, because they can see on a daily basis, things are coming through, the bank fees. They should be able to see exactly what you've said about the income and expenditures of their business, and looking at their cash flow and keeping on top of that. I mean, those are a bunch of advantages why someone who is starting out in business might do it themselves, because they're keeping down the cost. But for me, I think there's plenty of downsides of doing bookkeeping themselves. What's your thoughts on are there any downsides, any negatives of why people shouldn't do their own bookkeeping?
I think that, as you say, there are lots of reasons why, especially new businesses, are sort of keen to do their own bookkeeping. But I think in our experience, business owners, business managers aren't bookkeepers. They have their own sort of skill sets, their own reasons for going into businesses, and their own strengths, essentially. And sometimes bookkeeping just isn't that. So with the best of intentions, lots of business owners jump in and they start doing their own bookkeeping, Excel spreadsheets and Sage booksheets and all sorts of bits and pieces, recording income and outgoings and various bits and pieces. But it's not always kept in the best of order. So by the time it goes to the accountant, there are lots of gaps, lots of unreconciled information, confused bits and pieces, information in there that may be perceived as a personal expense rather than a business expense, lots and lots of anomalies that may go on. So the quality of the bookkeeping that person's doing may not be high enough for the accountants to create, decent sets of records for them. So, it's time consuming, but it can be doubly time consuming if they have to go back and they have to answer all the accountants' questions, or if they have to redo various bits and pieces, if they have to re-reconcile bank accounts or PayPal accounts or credit card expenses, debit card expenses. And to be honest with you, Simon, these are all things that our team of experts have lots and lots of experience in doing. So we've worked with companies of all different sizes for 10, 12 years now. We've experienced most of the anomalies that will occur. And we like to spend a bit of time right at the very beginning of our relationship with a customer, trying to learn as much as we can about their business, about their suppliers, and about the customers, about the sort of number of transactions and type of transactions that they're undertaking on a monthly basis, so that we can get everything set up well right at the very beginning, so that we can choose the best systems, the best processes to ensure that these things run smoothly. And to be fair, we report back to the customers to ensure that, if they're not doing their own bookkeeping on a daily basis, you make a they're not getting a crystal sort of view of the way that their business is performing, but doing that work on their behalf, and we're reporting back to them to let them know, or to question any expenses that are going out, anything that we spot or our guys are spotting that's not crystal clear, and it's not perhaps seen as being an essential expense, or at least it's risen as a question, so that the customer's still getting that overview of the way that their business is performing. But at the end of the day, it gives them back the time to spend on their own business and to really make the most of their own strengths. So it's really about doing what you're an expert in. We're expert bookkeepers, and our customers are experts in running their own business, and it makes sense really for everyone to do what they're good at.
I mean, it's interesting. There's a couple of points that I wanted to emphasize what you've said and to explore that, because you mentioned about people thinking, well, if I'm paying for Initor Global to do my bookkeeping services, and I'm not saying what the rates are, but let's imagine that it's £30 an hour on average. And I don't know what the rates are. Okay, but if we talked about it's £30 an hour, 10 hours, £300. And for anyone that's starting out in business, I get it. £300 is a lot of money when you are starting out in business. But what I would ask you to do as a business owner is to think about, well, how much money would you earn in your business if you weren't doing the bookkeeping. So whereby if someone like Innotor Global, I've never done bookkeeping properly myself. I've got to be honest with you. I'm not very good at it. And I'm an accountant. I'm trained and I still don't do it very well. But if I was to look at it, I might, I've just said it takes 10 hours for Innotor Global to do it, maybe £300. But if I was doing it, or another business owner is entrepreneurial who aren't good at doing the, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, I'm definitely not that type of person. I'm very much kind of speaking in theory and talking things through. But if I was to look at it and say, well, actually, I'll spend 15 hours instead of 10 because I'm correcting my mistakes or I'm going slower, I'm watching YouTube videos of how to do things on bookkeeping, which I'm not an expert on. Then actually the cost, even if I worked on the same basis, would be £450. But actually, if I'm a business owner, I might be charging £50 an hour. So now all of a sudden it's £600 for me to do my own bookkeeping versus £300 to let an expert do it. Which one do I prefer? Well, doing my business, surely.
I think one of the other interesting things with that as well, and I agree with what you just said is, but one of the extra things, the additional things I think that we bring to the table is the fact that if we are allocating everything in the right places, we're also dealing with the tax implications of everything. So, in terms of all of your expenses, we're making sure that we are claiming tax back where we can, that we're handling the tax well. So I think that, depending on the size of your business and the amount of turnover and the number of transactions that you have every month, but if you are looking at everything in the detail that we look at it at, we potentially can also save you, tax payments as well. If for any reason, HMRC would like to take a look at your books or that there's an investigation, you can rest assured that we've got everything in place, everything's in the right sort of sections, and it's easy and efficient for HMRC to jump in and have a look at it. So there are the kind of obvious advantages, but there are also the underlying advantages in that I think there is a cost for our business, and we have looked at that as well. So we tend to work on a kind of a number of transactions rather than charging an hourly rate for the work that we do. We base it on a number of transactions per month, and then we can work out, an affordable rate for customers. So, there's that to sort of bear in mind as well. But so I think there's also the potential tax savings. Whereas if a manager's doing it or if an owner's doing it, they may not know that there's specialist tax treatment for a certain expense and overlook it or not include it. We will recognise that. We'll make sure that we get that back for you. And as I say, the other thing is if heaven forbid there are any investigations from HMRC or anyone else, we can ensure that everything is handled professionally. It's all collated in the correct way, and it's all managed in a well done order.
I think there's a couple of things in that, and it echoed the first point I was going to raise was the fact that you do have someone looking at your work with you. So there's a great phrase, wood through the trees. Okay, so for anyone who's not heard that, basically it means that you could be looking at a whole forest, but you can't actually see a tree. And sometimes that one specific tree is what you should be looking at.
Yeah.
And someone who is doing work independently from you, and then you're coming in to do a review, you see things differently. If you're trying to do 100 transactions, you're looking at a transaction, but you're not looking sitting back looking at your business. You're trying to look at the transaction and getting it done. Yeah. And then it's a tick in the box, then you don't do the review. But one thing that we used to do, we don't do it anymore, is the FD service. And I think that's something that you guys, it sounds as though you're doing, because you're getting people to review their numbers and you're saying, well, have you thought about this from an income perspective or a cost perspective, from a tax perspective? And what's really interesting about that is that in actual fact, even though people see your services, bookkeeping as a whole as a cost, what they should be looking at it as an investment, because it allows them to go back to what their business is all about. But it also helps them to identify some of the tax efficiencies that you can help them identify.
Absolutely right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So let's talk about people doing it themselves. I'm a huge advocate of people outsourcing things that A, they don't find interesting, and B, they're not really good at. And there are going to be people that watch this video and say, well, it's okay for you. You've been in business for a number of years and you can afford to do all this. But actually, I always started with the end in mind. As Stephen Covey once said, start with the end in mind. If you want to be successful, you've got to act successful. And that means sometimes you've got to invest now to get something out in the future. Penny pinching is not something I always think is a good thing at all. I do think it will bite you in the bottom at some point in time, whether that's because of you are not investing in yourself, not investing in your business, but more importantly, you're penny pinching on the wrong thing, and you ought to be looking at your business. But let's talk about some of the disasters, some of the issues with people trying to do things themselves, Fraser. What things has In It All Global seen from people trying to do things themselves, but it's not worked out?
I think there are a number of things, things that we hear almost every day at the moment. Just the fact that they're not recording information accurately, so receipts are going missing, or stuff isn't getting updated because systems aren't in place. People don't have a set of procedures to follow to record bits and pieces. And it sounds really silly, but if you're missing out a couple of expenses a week or a couple of expenses a day or whatever it is, over a year, over 3 years, over 5 years, obviously that can add up to a huge amount of income or outgoings, and it can affect the account. So it's one of those kind of basic things. Get the systems in place, make sure that it's being done right, and it has to be done. I think one of the other things is correctly categorizing your expenses. So making sure that the expenses are categorized and they go in the right folder almost. So it's important that you know what the expenses are, what categories they go into, and if there are any tax implications on those expenses, then how they can be treated and how we can potentially claim any of those taxes back. I think one of the biggest kind of conversations that I hear at the moment from our teams are, especially with the new businesses that start up, is the bank reconciliation. So bank reconciliations it's one of those kind of things that everyone assumes is done by somebody else, or everyone's assuming that someone's reconciling the bank accounts, but it's one of those things that often gets overlooked and is an essential process that we go through. I think especially with new companies, sometimes businesses are started up very, very quickly. Perhaps they don't have time to open up a business account or a dedicated business account. So sometimes there's a personal account with business expenses in it, or there's a business account with personal expenses in it. And it's really important that we separate those personal expenses from the business expenses, and that we reconcile those bank accounts frequently to ensure that business is business and the personal is personal, and we can treat each in most effective way. I think as part of our bookkeeping services, we also provide payroll services, and payroll is something I think that people kind of assume is a very sort of simple, basic, and easy thing to do. And I think in logically, it sounds like it should be, but there are lots and lots of complicating factors. The biggest sort of conversations I hear having at our end are people not getting the tax codes right, people not getting the right payments made every month. There are things to consider like statutory maternity pay, statutory sick pay, share scheme payments. There's all sorts of different sort of anomalies that come into it. There are certain things that are treated in a special way. The SIC payments are treated in a special way. And our guys in our bookkeeping and payroll departments, as I mentioned to you earlier, have been doing this for years and years and years with companies of all sizes. So from brand new startups up to established businesses with hundreds of employees. And we look after all of these things in a very, very cost effective and very, very efficient way. Because especially with payroll, it's one of those things, as I say, it's seen as being, a simple thing.